Are you ready to take your first steps towards financial freedom by investing in property? Whether you're a first-time investor or you started your portfolio but need some help continuing to grow, 2022 REB Buyers Agent of the Year and Rising Star finalist Lachlan Vidler and his team at Atlas Property Group are here to help. As experts in property investment, Lachlan and his team are ready to help you take your next step in growing your portfolio. By completing the research, sourcing and negotiations, Lachlan goes the extra mile to find you a high-performing investment property. Visit atlaspropertygroup.com.au to book in your discovery call absolutely free of charge.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hello everyone, Grace Ormsby here. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. It's been a pretty big week in property, I have to say. We've just obviously seen, and we feel like it's, the story that we keep talking about, but it keeps happening. The Reserve Bank of Australia has upped their rates once again, another 50 basis point lift. We've seen definitely a changing marketplace over the next couple of months. So it felt pretty timely to be bringing in, some insights from a very recent report from PRD, their latest economic and property report, aptly titled Different Markets, Different Speeds. Tells us what's going on at the moment. To talk all through that and share some of her own experiences of property lately is friend of the show, the chief economist at PRD, Dr. Diyaswati Mardiasmo. Asti, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I love when we get together and chat because we always, there's so much to talk about when we're talking about property. And given your economics expertise, it just feels, we get such a good grounding of that data, but then we also talk through, the real world ramifications of that data, which I think is so, so important for listeners of this show, to not only see what that data is doing, but understand how it can actually be affecting them in their property investment journey. And to start off with, can I get you to just give us some insight into this report, which is Different Markets, Different Speeds, because that is what we're seeing at the moment. We talk about usually a two-speed market, but I feel like we're probably on the third, fourth, and fifth speed market at the moment.
Look, I'm going to be very honest with you, Grace. I look at the data and obviously, as you say, from an economics perspective and what's been happening in each of the market. And I think this is the very first time that, and I'm not afraid to admit this, that I've seen such a fragmented market across Australia. And that is what this report is all about. It highlights how different capital cities are moving, whether you're in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Darwin, Perth, Hobart, Adelaide, Canberra. All those markets are moving at different speeds. There are some markets that is still growing and, still a little bit more far away from their peak. We've seen Sydney and Melbourne starting to turn. Brisbane is still growing, although there are some suburbs within Brisbane that is starting to turn. And that's just in the capital city markets. We haven't even gotten to the metro areas, which is not just your inner city market, but kind of like everything between your capital city, your inner city, and the regional areas. There's different movements in metro markets as well. There's markets that are growing at a double-digit pace still, and there's markets that are now growing at a single-digit pace. Beforehand, they were at double digits. And then at regional markets, we're basically seeing all regional markets across Australia still doing double-digit growth, but some of them are around that 10, 12 sort of like percent. And then there's others that are at that 20, 21, 22%. And so it's so fragmented right now. And that's why the title is Different Markets, Different Speeds, because literally there's a difference between capital, metro, and regional. And yet there's still differences within capital, within metro, and within regional. So, that's kind of like what is it called? The elevator pitch, like that 30 seconds, sort of like wrap around of the 24 odd pages that is the report. But yeah, the property playground, and I love calling it the property playground because that's, what we're all playing with in at the moment is, like I said, probably the most fragmented that I've seen.
That's just giving me such strong imagery, Asti, of slides going down. You've got the ladders still going up. There's some seesaws probably, going. That's such a good way to put it. And it so aptly does reflect what we're seeing at the moment. So what is it that you think are the major factors that are still, I guess, let's start from the positive side of things, the markets that are still seeing that growth? What are the influences or the factors that are being attributed to that kind of growth at the moment?
Look, when it comes to property price growth, whether, you're stabilizing, going up, going down, at the end of the day, everything depends on your demand and supply balance. And in every single market, we're seeing a variance in the demand and supply balance. As an overall, we can kind of say that, supply is lagging. There's been some construction issues, etc. But then even in that space, there's still a breakdown as to supply for house and land or a supply for townhouses. Even when you say a supply for units or apartments, it can still be broken down to the supply of 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, studios, right? And so depending on which market that you're working in, what is your dominant sort of property type in that particular market, that then determines your supply equation. The other part of the equation is, of course, demand. Now, with the cash rate increasing, it does mean that people's borrowing power have lessened. And so you might start to see some people tapping out of the market, and that takes away out of your demand. But at the same time, we also have international students coming back. We also have first home buyers who now might be on that precipice of being able to purchase because of the home schemes, the grants, all of the new things that the government is putting out. New parents or single parents coming back into the market, returning overseas people, from everywhere around the world that has now come back into Australia, coming back into the market. So when you kind of pair that, and something that I love kind of imagery wise is, this is going to sound really weird, but I think of Lego people and I'm like, okay, so there's 5 Lego people on the demand side and 3 of them have decided to tap out because of financial reasons, cash rate, whatever else. But then another 4 people might decide to tap back in because of their financial situation. And so, you kind of go, okay, so yes, beforehand we started with 5 people, 2 have tapped out, but a few more have come in and now demand is back to either 5 or 6 again. But the makeup of that demand have changed. And so it's that sort of balance between that demand and supply that is really impacting each market differently.
I was going to then move my questioning, Asti, to what has caused the market to drop. But it feels like very much the same answer of what you just gave. And just things are changing. And that's what we need to expect when things do change. There's going to be supply side, there's going to be demand side and all of that. I know we have, and I guess, from that generalization piece is that, the whole of Australian markets have shifted downwards a little bit in the last little while. And that is based on those averages. Would it be fair to say that there's still, that it's not even a ceiling because it's at the bottom. There's that floor that is in place and that's those Lego people are coming in and ensuring that that floor stays there.
Yeah. Look, property has always been in our blood when it comes to equity, when it comes to building wealth. Property is, the primary need of every person, right? You're looking at the Maslow's hierarchy and it tells you that shelter is the number one thing. And because there is that need from that perspective, that it is a primary need, and it is also the biggest asset that most Australians will have in their portfolio for retirement, for equity, financial planning, whichever one that you're in at the moment. Because of those 2 things, there's always going to be government intervention to try and assist us. And it may sometimes not come as a direct kind of like we're assisting you in your purchasing price or we're assisting you in your home loan. It might come as a scheme or as a grant, or they might, alleviate some taxes so that it can then free up some of the household disposable income so that we can afford the cash rate increases. Or it could be a direct transfer that everyone is getting for cost of living purposes. So however which way that the RBA is kind of like changing what we need to be paying and what we can afford, the government is your other clap of hands, so to speak, like it's your other side that tries to balance that out because they don't want to get to that floor level where what we've invested into our properties, into our values, then just is devalued and does not have any value anymore. And so there's always going to be that intervention to make sure that, yes, we, even though it seems as if we're losing value right now, on a long-term perspective, like that 5-10 year sort of perspective, we're always going to be gaining value.
And really, that's in everyone's best interest for that to still happen. And I mean, even just thinking about the fact that even though we're seeing price drops now in some areas, they're still probably above what they were in February 2020, aren't they?
This is one of those psychological things that I love exploring because it hurts more for us to lose $1 than to make $10.
I am writing that down right now because it does, doesn't it?
It's kind of like, I talk to so many people and like, because I'm such a data person, right? And, I look at it on so in a 12-month basis, maybe on a percentage level, you have, the price have declined by say 2%, 3%, just taking a number out of that. But on a 10-year, since the very first time that you bought the property, if you were to sell now, it would be a 70% growth, say, for example. So 70% minus 3% is still 67% that you're making on your first purchase. But it hurts you more to lose that 3% because you kind of go, oh my God, that's me losing out on $30,000. Even though you've made $100,000, you're still thinking about the $30,000 that you have abstractly, because it's not in your pocket. So it's like an abstract amount that you have lost because of the market going down. And so, human psychology and a lot of behavioral scientists have said it hurts us more to lose $1 than to make $10.
A great point to make there, Asti. We're going to take a quick break there, but stay tuned, everyone, because straight after that, I'm in Sydney, Asti is in Brisbane, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the differences, those two-speed markets really, really at play and what's going on there. So be back soon.
Ever wondered how you can invest like the top 1% of Australian property investors? Henderson Advocacy has been at the forefront of helping everyday Aussies improve their financial freedom. So if you're a savvy investor or someone just starting out on their property journey, give Henderson Advocacy a call today. Head to www.henderson.com.au. Don't invest alone. Invest smarter.
Welcome back to this episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm joined by Dr. Diaswati Mardiasmo, the Chief Economist at PRD. We've talked about the report and what's going on, different speeds affecting all different markets across Australia. And I think this is a really important and really interesting point to bring up, Asti, because you yourself, I know that you're a property investor. Everyone who has listened to your previous episodes on the show would know that you're a property investor. If you haven't, I highly recommend going back just a couple of months, really. We were chatting all through that portfolio, but there's some interesting developments going on. And I think you're actually just so well placed to be talking about this because I know that the different markets is actually influencing your property investment journey right now.
Yes, it is. We hear a lot at the moment about, and I get this all the time in terms of questions. Should I buy? Should I sell? Should I keep my investment? Do I tap out? Do I stay in? Or is there a better investment for me out there? And, at the moment, because there, as an investor, of course, the one thing that you want is you want to make sure that your investment is financially viable. And yes, we have seen a lot of rental price increases because of the shortages in the markets. And again, that's a different thing as well, because there are some capital cities right now where the vacancy rate is under 0.5%, but there are still capital cities where the vacancy rate is above 1%. And so again, that creates even just that difference in the vacancy rates, which of course us as investors always want to know, because that's our occupancy rates, right? So that creates kind of like a different market in different places. So at the moment, on a personal level, and I do have permission from my partner to use him as a case study, by the way.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Which we always appreciate, right? It's funny because we're both investors, and yet one of us is still in the market and the other one is tapping out. And it's because of two different reasons. Like, I operate in a market that is in Indooroopilly, in Brisbane, very much so central to like your, University of Queensland University of Technology, very sort of like student accommodation based almost. And my property is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit apartment. Bought it back in 2016. I had to remember that because I know that I bought it as it was almost like a push present, like as in when I gave birth to my daughter. And I had to remember, and she's turning 6 in like 4 days, Grace.
Which one's given you better capital gains?
Look.
So far anyway.
One's a little bit more proven than the other. I think I have to bank on a few more years until the other one gives me that capital gain. But I bought it back in 2016. So it's somewhat sort of new, like about 6 years old, 5 years old, right? But it is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And so in the apartment space is a little bit more of a unique property in that particular area, because most of the properties are either studios or 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. Whereas my partner's, his is a townhouse in Bigara Waters. And with a townhouse, it's almost like a standard configuration, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, like that's kind of like the standard townhouse that you have. And so even just from a property type, it's already different in terms of what would be the supply level for each of those property types in the market. Because if you look at the availability of a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit in Indooroopilly at the moment, there's almost none, like literally zero. I could have charged more rent if I wanted to, but I decided not to jack it up by $120. And that's only because I have quite a lot of equity in the property, which meant that I went up by $50 and all the costs are still, covered.
For sure.
On the other side, my partner's strategy has always been like a long-term sell, because the prices of properties have gone up. And so then it could be turned into a better valued, a better investment type. But at the same time, we've had cash rate increases, and as well as council rate increases, body corporate increases, insurance, everything that not many people know that investors are saddled with when it comes to costs. And so the balance between cost and rental income was not fully financially viable. And if we held off quite a while before selling again, then because of the current cash rate situation and the less borrowing power and the fact that there's quite a lot of them in the market down there, then we might actually be not losing money, but not maximizing the benefit or that capital gains of that investment. And so there was a choice made in tapping out in that market, but keeping the one that I'm playing in. And so, even though we're both investors, even though we've both been in the market for a while, different markets, different speeds, different property types, different substitute level of the property that we have, different financial viabilities, different strategies.
And I would love to remind our audience or let people know that maybe haven't heard your whole story. You and your partner actually have completely separate portfolios to this point, don't you?
Yes, we do. We have completely separate portfolios. So even though, we're together, he bought his before we became a one, so to speak. That just reminded me of the Spice Girls song, To Become One. But anyway, so he had his property beforehand. I have mine beforehand as well, before the whole To Become One thing. But we've kept it separate because as much as, you know me, Grace, I'm a romantic.
You love each other.
Love is love, When it comes to financial decisions, I also believe in that financial security on an individual basis. So it is completely separate. And we do talk to each other about it, of course. And, me being in the property market, we feed off each other when it comes to data and all that. But this is such a great example of that the differences in markets is really, and the differences in strategy as well, is really impacting what we're doing right now. So one of us is still in and one of us have tapped out.
I'm getting the real vibes. I'm not going to name names around that superannuation ad, but you've both got on the elevator and one's going up and one's going down. but it's not just necessarily, well, it is because of different market returns, but obviously, as much as you've got different strategies behind your portfolios, it does sound like you're very much still on the same page about where you're going with that strategy, because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it was your property that was in that marketplace, you would be doing the same thing.
Exactly. It's a different action in terms of in and out kind of thing. But in terms of the overall strategy of actually maximizing our portfolios, the goal is still the same. Kind of like that endpoint is still the same, because I know that his strategy has always been a long-term selling strategy so that it can be kind of recycled into a better valued or a higher performing asset. And of course, then that leads into that, higher portfolio and, better returns. Whereas for me, it's the same, but I feel like where I'm at right now, that is already what I'm doing. So, the goal is the same, but the vehicles are different, so to speak. I almost said the word journey. I know I promised never to say the word journey because it's been used so much. But yeah, so the vehicle's definitely different there. But yeah, the road is the same.
I'm going to be really, really stereotypical here and use the word journey to say, though, that, it is proof that everyone's journey can take completely different routes, but still have that same end goal and we see that all the time. That's what we really, really love about talking to investors on this show. And it's just so, I just love that you're literally, standing next to each other and you're still going, hang on, what's the best thing to be doing here? And it is different, but it is based on the market and what's going on externally, as opposed to, internal fears or, it's very much a market-led approach.
It definitely is. I mean, look, if it comes to emotions, I'm definitely more emotional than he is. And I do have more sentimental value in my property than he does. And I will admit that because, that was kind of like I said, that property of mine in Indooroopilly, that marked Ariela's birth. So, the age of that property matches her age completely. And so there is sentimental value in there for me as well. But at the same time, because I am a researcher and because I do look at it almost from a cold hard facts sort of perspective, it is very much so that market-led, that data-led. And I do understand that when it comes to investments, it can be difficult to choose. I've had to help quite a few friends who've got a portfolio of, say, 3 or 4 and trying to decide which one to keep, which one to let go. And it is all based on what the markets are doing and how financially viable the properties are. and how does it all lend to the overall long-term strategy.
We're going to take another break there. We'll be back in just a moment with more from Dr. Diaswati Mardiasmo.
It's time to get help. Interest rates are increasing. Inflation has hit an extraordinary 5.1%, and the chance to secure a golden egg property is getting narrower by the day. Dragan from Buyers Agency Australia has been presenting the facts and helping property investors make smarter, well-informed, educated decisions in property for years. So, what are you waiting for? Get in touch with Dragan today at www.buyersagencyaustralia.com.au. Invest with integrity.
Welcome back to this episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm joined by Chief Economist Dr. Diaswati Mardiasmo. Asti, I do have to ask you at this point in the episode, because I know last time we chatted, you were considering what your next move would be. Are you still in that point of going, I'm almost ready to go again? You know, what are you sort of looking at next?
So, look, and I know I'm tying it back to the report, but as I said, because I am very data-led and very sort of like, evidence-based, I can see that even in this very fragmented market right now, there is some uniformity. And that uniformity is in the form of regional markets being very, very resilient. Like if I look at all the tables, I see, whether it's a minus, a plus, double digit, single digit in the capital markets, same thing in the metro, single digit, double digit, a couple of them going backwards. But in the regional, they're all still doing double digits. Yes, some of them are like I said, that 10, 11, 12. Some are at the 20. So that is, even then, that's a different speed. But as a uniform, all of the regional markets are still performing at double digits. So I haven't given up my search yet, Grace. I am still all for the regionals. I am still looking at different regional market. I've been looking in Broome. I've been looking at Whitsundays and Mackay. I've been looking at more locally around the Ipswich and further out from Ipswich. And I've even started looking at some of the markets in Hobart as well, and particularly in regional Tasmania, where there's a little bit more bang for buck in terms of median house prices, because then I'm not dealing with Sydney median house prices or Brisbane
enough
median
to turn
house prices.
anyone off, to be honest. But yeah, so what is it then that you do look for when you're looking at these properties? And you're obviously casting a very, very wide net, and that's a great way to do it too. More diversification, more options available to you. So what are kind of your non-negotiables when you are looking?
Look, for me, I think I've mentioned before, this whole COVID thing, it has really opened up people's property playground. So beforehand, our playground might be the areas that we know, or the areas that our parents have invested in, or our friends have invested in. So this time around, because thanks to COVID, I can't believe I'm saying thanks to COVID, but thanks to COVID, we have all of this new technology now, to where you can step through the whole VR sort of like systems to see different houses, different apartments. You can do so many different things with technology, like online auctions, videos, even WhatsApp calls with like your agents to walk you through the property. And because of that, that's why I am casting a wider net. And I'll admit that, because beforehand, my net was more Southeast Queensland. And now I've opened myself up to the rest of the country pretty much. Some of my non-negotiables is, first and foremost, that the rental income will not be able to cover the cost. That's one of like the financial liabilities that I always go through, right? Because obviously you have your purchase price, and at regional levels or at regional areas, it is much less than capital city. But at the same time, when it comes to rent, it may not be as high as capital city as well. But it's matching those two between at least that it can cover the mortgage costs, because on top of the mortgage costs, there will always be other costs. There will be council rates, insurance, everything else that us investors have to pay. So at least there's that. I am moving away from the unit and townhouses type of properties only because my experience with my current investment is that body corporate can get high and that it is growing as well. From my own perspective, my body corporate has definitely gone up by about 3%. So I didn't want another property investment where it will get chewed up in that body corporate. So at least I can take out one of the costs. And also when it comes to investment, I always think of the on-sale strategy afterwards. And we know at the moment that supply, particularly for standalone houses, whether it's at capital city, metro and regional areas, is quite low. There's more and more townhouses and units and land lots being created, but not so standalone houses. So based on that, then it tells me, say in the next 7 years or in the next 10 years, that having that house and land package or a standalone dwelling as an investment also guarantees my land value increase and capital gains in the future.
Some very good points there. So I think as well, following on from that and harking back again, sorry to everyone who is listening, but to our last conversation where you were talking about potentially merging some of those finances with your partner, I'm even more curious now if he is looking at, cashing out on the property that he's with now. Is that something that's in the works or not at the moment?
Grace, if we ever do, if it does become one, you'll be the first to know.
Okay.
And there might be an invite coming your way. But if it happens, I'm not saying that.
So it's still a watch this space thing. So it sounds like he's still got his own plans to reinvest that money. Is he looking at similar markets to you?
He still has his own plans to reinvest that money. I still have my own plans when it comes to financials, but, I think we've come to a place now where if we are about to buy a property together, again, that to become one thing, it would be a separate to all of the investments that we currently have.
Yeah.
So even if we do cash out one of our investments to become that one, we would still have our own portfolios. It wouldn't be kind of like selling everything that is in the basket to put it into one. It'll be more kind of like, because I've got a few in mind. He's got a few, potentially selling one of those out, cashing out to combine into one. So, that's one option.
There's different starting points, isn't there? Like that doesn't mean that your current journey, sorry to use the word, but you've still got your own path and it's going to continue as it always has on those separate train tracks, but then you're also just going to create another one in the middle potentially.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's one of those things because it's, for me, like I said, I'm a romantic realist. So there's the romantic part of me that would like to have a home with my partner, the kid, the cat, the dog, the fish, the turtle, whatever else comes with it, right? But at the same time, there's also a part of me that is very much so about financial independence, about having that backup, about, having that sort of like equity that I can call myself so that, and I mean, I'm very open about this. Everyone knows that I have been divorced before. And if anything does happen, there is that protection on my side and hopefully on his too. And, I think it's all about being fair on keeping those train tracks separate, but then also creating a train track that is us,
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the romantic realist version of investment.
And it's always going to change, isn't it? And I feel like even now it's a slightly different conversation to what we did have last time in that it was still quite separate. You did allude to the fact that it could happen down the track, but it's just that conversation that's ongoing, isn't it? And that's got to be some good peace of mind for you.
I think because we're both of the same mindset, and I think that's the most important thing, we both come into the relationship with our own sort of like portfolios, and we both have the same mindset that we don't have to merge everything for the whole love is love thing. We can still have the love is love home, but keep our own investment portfolios separate. And because we do have that same mindset, I think that's the reason why we work.
There you go. I mean, we don't often get very sappy on the Smart Property Investment Show, but I am totally here for it.
I feel that we might have just crossed over on
something
that.
else. So we now have we become a love podcast? No, we have not. But we might stick to property because we know it best. But I do love, they're the real conversations that people are out there having every day. And if you're listening along and going, I'm in a similar situation, or I'm not sure whether I want to be combining finances with my partner, or what is the best way for it, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to find out, how everyone is navigating this, because anytime you put, the emotions that come with relationships, with the attempts to stay very removed from property investing, it's tough. You can't fully tease them apart, can you?
No, you can't. And, we've even talked about what will happen if there's a child. At the moment, Ariella is mine, although, of course, he is a father figure. But what happens if, we and, my staff who might be listening to this later is probably going to have a heart attack. What about if I go on maternity leave because I am about to pop out another one, Grace? What does that mean for our investment portfolios and for our future children? And so the conversation and the strategies also will always change. And that the whole thing, the change in your lifestyle, your cycle of life, because everyone is at that different time, even though we're all now faced with the same concerns, cash rate going up, property prices, cost of living, because everyone is at that different stage, it then translates back into the decision-making that we're all different and goes back into a fragmented market.
There you go. We've come full circle, different markets, different speeds, haven't we? But that's what it's all about. And that's why people use property investing as a method to build their wealth. Asti, thank you so much for your time today. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I really, really enjoy these chats, and I can't wait for the next one already.
Oh, thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for having me on the show.
To everyone who is listening along, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Like or review us, whatever platform that you do listen to your podcasts on. And as I mentioned just before, if you've got a story similar to Asti, maybe it's very, very different, the way you've looked at your financial situation between you and a partner, reach out, let us know. We want to be hearing from you. editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. These are the conversations that we need to be having, especially when we are seeing a vastly different market to what we did last year. And obviously that affects everyone very differently. But as always, stay up to date as well with all the latest news on the Smart Property Investment website. Subscribe if you haven't already, and check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. Until next episode, stay safe and well wherever you are listening from. Bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
It's safe to say the property market has been red hot over the last few years, with some of the markets we've selected in 2021 rising over 40% in a 12-month period. It's very likely that if you're a property owner, your property has gone up 20% minimum in value in the past 12 months, and you have most likely accrued sizable equity that can be recycled and extracted to build your investment portfolio. With interest rates increasing, you might be wondering where to invest to maximise capital growth and cash flow in 2022 and beyond. Well, to save you time, energy and guesswork, award-winning author and regular guest on the Smart Property Investment podcast, Paul Glossop and his team at Pure Property Investment have outlined the top 30 affordable suburbs poised for strong capital growth over the next few years with sound cash flow. Grab your free Top 30 Guide to Property Investment guide today at purepropertyinvestment.com.